So I think we can begin. I'm sorry about the confusion. I'm told that there was communication that because of the master's presentations, we cannot meet. Well, I don't have that communication. I know that the master's presentations going on, but I also know that we missed classes and I may travel and we may miss more classes. I'm also aware that Monday we don't have a class because of the holiday. So I mean, my decision was maybe going to have the class. So perhaps someone should have asked whether we are going to have a class or not. But well, I was wondering where everybody is. So it is now I'm aware about this. It's a bit unfortunate, but at least you're here. So I think we can proceed from where we left off last Monday. And probably just got straight there. I think when we were, before we parted on Monday, we were looking at the moment of truth model and basically thinking about it in terms of uh, the ethic thinking uh, framework. So more or less adapting the moment of truth model to just allow me 1 minute. Just a bit of noise. I don't have my earphones off. Let me just move. Right. Okay, so just move to the lab away from the noise. Right, so I think we can proceed. I hope you can all hear me. Great, thank you. So I think this is where we were, and we were trying to unpack this. And I think the issue was the aspects about just thinking about the moment of truth. Yeah, the moment of truth, the aspect of the heightened activity at the moment of recognition. I think that's where we were. And so we're trying to illustrate this with a case, okay, an ethical case that involved where is this? I thought I had opened it. Yeah, this is the one. Yes, I think we began to talk about this. We're thinking about Intel's shipwreck. It's playing about with the language. So it's the Pentium chip. So the shipwreck, as it were. So I think we went through this, so you probably can start there. There are two others, but it's on the classroom, so I would just encourage us to just look at it. There's still another one. that still has to do with, you know, it's a it's a very interesting case. You want to look at it, but I think let's just think about the one we looked at. So, so I'd like us to, I just identify from that narrative that the case, the moments of truth, any moment of recognition, and whether there was moments of resolution. So based on this model, um, so let's just hear whether we can identify the moments of truth in this case of Intel. Who wants to go? Who wants to go first? Sorry, just continue. Just start again, please. Okay. Yeah, so when they discovered that the chip had some circuit issues, okay? So how is that a moment of truth? I just want you to speak into that a little bit more. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, fine. Someone else, the moment that Intel discovered uh, the missing circuits and the error. Eugene? Sorry, is it just me? I can't hear you, Eugene. I don't know. I think you're muted. Um, okay, okay. So this is a question, Eugene. Oops. So this is a question. Oh, these are the questions. Identify. Oh, oops. Let me just share again. Yeah, so the question is identify the moment of truth, if more than one. Identify any moment of recognition and then the moment of resolution. That, of course, based on uh, the, the moment of truth model, right? Moment of truth, moment of recognition, and resolution. So yeah, that's a question. So, sorry, I didn't get to say person who responded because I was in a different window. The reason I was asking for more information is because the moment of truth is the moment at which point a moral agent needs to make a decision. So they are faced with a decision. And the result of the whichever decision they take has ethical implications. Okay. So the moment of truth is a moment of decision making by a moral agent. So doing your work and at some point something happens, an event happens or something happens that requires you to take a decision. And that decision will have moral implications. Okay. So just to go along with the fact that when Intel discovered the circuits had a problem, that's a moment of truth. Anyway, I was trying to prod you a bit. So the moment of truth is, yes, that's a point, but not. If you say it's just when they discovered, then there's a problem because the actual moment of truth is when they made the decision not to communicate with the people that the chips out there, in other words, the computers out there, has in the processor has a flaw. It's a flaw that they had discovered. It was affecting arithmetic calculations. So the decision was made to fix it, but to be quiet. So at the point of that decision making, that's a moment of truth. So the discovery, yes, but at the point when they decided not to tell people, okay, so that's a moment of truth. Okay. Can you discover any other moment of truth? Any other moment of truth? So I think there were a number of moments of truth. The first one, of course, is like you just mentioned, when the discovery was made and a decision was made not to tell the people. Okay. Then when this mathematics professor, you know, releases this information on the internet, and Intel had to come out and admit that they knew about it and they had already resolved it, but they also recognized that the chips out there have an error. But they made the decision that it's not a big deal. Okay, offered to replace 40 chips, but only if it could be demonstrated the user really needed an N-flow chip. Okay, so that's another moment of truth, because whereas you're admitting, you're basically saying we're not going to do it. You have to come and actually prove to us that you need it. In other words, it's not a big deal. Okay. So of course, I think this goes on. I think there's still another one where the media broke the story, but they maintained that decisions are made to continue digging in and saying there's nothing to see here. This is a storm in a teacup. Okay. All right. So what about the moment of recognition? Okay, so the moment the recognition is about the moral agent, it's about the one who has made the decision that has caused all the has brought about the heightened activity, right? The noise that has actually, because of the decision, it has brought ethical. It has actually the decision or the action has had ethical implications. It's harming people. It's hurting people. And there's all this heightened activity. So the recognition is actually the moral agent. It is the one who took the decision in the first place. Yeah, so based due to the heightened activity, due to all the noise, and all the many things happen, then they have to come to the place of recognizing, I guess, the harm they have done, or the 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 hurt that their decision has made to others. That's a moment of recognition. So basically, it was actually inside the case. Huh? So when this professor um, you know, after all the noise and all the sharing and the, the senior vice president being uh, they were flooded with messages of outrage. And of course, when ultimately, you know, this professor made this decision to tell the students about the Intel Insight. So you have to understand, like it said, Intel Insight was an 80 million US dollar branding, rebranding, and marketing to more or less tell the world about, the power of the process. So every time they hold of a laptop or a desktop machine, the basically saying, you have a powerful processor inside. But basically, someone was going to use it to turn it on its head, so that every time you see that, so it's a recognition that it's brought this pain and it's come today. So the moment, is a recognition of the heart and the, they have brought into the people and owning it. Okay. And then, of course, making a decision to do something about it. So that's in a nutshell a moment of recognition. Okay. So, of course, there is a bit of resolution here also, is the fact that they actually decided they would recall and replace all the flawed uh, Pentium chips. Okay. So that was resolution. Okay, so they resolved the issue so they don't bring hurt to people, one. But secondly, perhaps, you would see much more than that. Maybe a policy decision or a decision is taken to ensure that doesn't happen again. Okay. So basically that's just what I wanted us to see, and I would encourage us uh, to look at the other two cases, just that you are clear about uh, this. ethical thinking framework, or the moment of truth framework, and how that relates. So that's a reality. And of course, the main thing is that we're saying there needed to have been some posts to reflect based on ethical thinking. Hopefully, the organization has some ethical principles, or ethical theories they rely on. But see, that should really have been built into into the policies of the organization, into the uh, processes and procedures of decision making of the organization. So that is what should have, when they had to think it through, what are you going to do about it? It's kind of meaning they should have done something about it, to basically avoid all this noise, this heightened activity that actually, if you remember, so much has happened. Their stock was actually losing value. Some of the main manufacturers like IBM at the time said, we're not going to, release any more computers with this chip. So of course their sales were suffering. Then there was basically people saying these machines overflow and everything else. So that is actually the noise. And all this happened because of the decision they took when they acted and did not take on board issues to do with so let's just think about it. What I want to do is I want to raise a few issues, then we look at something else about professionalism. Then I'll let you just look at the rest of the notes. So we've talked about the moment of truth. So we are clear about the moment of truth. Okay. So the question here is, ideally there are three cases. There are many, many, many more. I think we raised in passing issues, like for instance, the question of uh, the Snowden saga, okay? National Security Agency of the US, and the US was spying on its citizens using systems. It was actually a system that had been put in place. I can't remember its name, probably still there. But so you, as a contractor, given responsibility to actually run the system, to actually be the ones who are, spying on behalf of the government with the systems that you put in place. Then, of course, someone has to make that decision. Okay, so then, of course, we talked about the Cambridge Analytica, and there are many others. For instance, where you find, say, a company decides to use the data that they harvest from online platforms to actually do direct marketing, for instance. Okay, or they basically get hold of your data and use it for something else. So all these are moments of truth. So in which the fact that we're living in this society where our work, our economic activities, our communication, our entertainment, our interactions, our communication are basically enabled and facilitated by ICTs. It brings about a heightened possibilities for the moments of truth. So we're basically trying to ask, why is it that ICTs seem to create a lot of moments of truth? Okay. And so we raised an issue which is not about the moment of truth, but it's a bottle that was used in the 50s and 60s a lot around innovation. And it's called the supply push and the demand pull hypothesis. So the supply push hypothesis basically says that there's a recognition that technology is a positive force. It's a good thing. It brings about, efficiency, effectiveness, productivity. It brings about doing things easier, better, cheaper. it brings about well-being, it brings about, you know, development, it brings about lots of beautiful things. For that reason, what you want to do is just create technology, innovation, and roll it out. So when you do that, people shall find use for it. It's a powerful force. Okay? So that's the supply push hypothesis. It's actually a model that was propounded after the war, in the late 40s into the 1950s, 1960s, to explain about technology innovation. Then there was another one, the counter to that was the demand pool. So the demand pool basically says, listen, you don't want to just create technology and then expect people to use it. You want to create technology and expect people to use it. So information. So that's your lead to increased information, and the more increase of information, then the more you remember the issue of the domain of ethics, and ICTs tend to increase the domain of ethics. So it brings the possibility to actually get more value uh, in terms of the possibility for praiseworthy behavior increases, but also the possibility for evil behavior increases. So the potential for ethical issues rises up. On the other hand, you have the scenario where people implement, you know, IT infrastructure, IT applications, all kind of devices, because they perceive that people need them. So whether people need them or not, anyway, you're loading them out. It's lots of information. And because the more information, then of course you're increasing the use of information. And when you do that, it goes to bring about ethical issues. But why is this happening? We talked about issues of temptation, we talked about quandaries, okay? So, because there's lots of information that is enabling things like wealth creation, economic activities, and livelihoods, work, and everything else, so then the information is valuable. And because it's valuable, then access to that information brings with it temptation, because I'll get it at any, you know, however way I can, because it's valuable for me. So it presents that temptation to actually get it, even though you're getting it or using it in a way that is unethical, that you harm people. Okay. So yes, so whereas of course it's very valuable, but because of its value, it can be seductive. So that I'll get it by hook or crook, and even if it means walking on people's heads and harming and hurting people. Okay, so but more or less the very value then creates possibilities for temptation. Okay. So of course, I think we revisit what we mentioned, that when you're doing this, when you're accessing services, for instance, of Safaricom or M-Pesa, for instance, or even accessing services at the university where they actually require you to give lots of information for you to apply to come to the university, okay, and for you to access the service. You're always giving information. Or maybe it's e-citizen, they'll ask you for your data, your information. Or maybe it's when you go to see a doctor, okay? Or maybe when you more or less have a financial service provider like a bank or a payment platform that you use, they're asking for your information. So you are the givers of that information. Then, of course, the organization are the takers of that information. Okay. So, of course, there will be the people who gather the process, store, and disseminate that information, which you are calling the orchestrators. And so those will now be the people who actually operate the information systems, operate the application. So think about maybe maybe their systems, maybe they are the people who are implementing the cybersecurity, the people who are, for instance, maybe security officers, maybe systems people in terms of administration, okay, maybe the people who actually get the data that you're providing and manipulating. I think, for instance, a scenario like, say, what are the supermarket chains do. So you're going there all the time and you're actually purchasing your products, but then they give you a card. They tell you it's so that you can get points and you could actually utilize them for shopping. So that's the incentive, but is that the truth? Bongo points. Is the truth that Safaricom wants to be altruistic and want to help people? Not really, no. Okay? They basically want to make sure that they get your data in terms of every transaction, whenever, wherever, however, and for how much. Okay? So they're basically just gathering all that information and doing analytics of that information, coming up with their customer profiles, and that is actually helping them in their marketing, in their, how they stock their shelves, in how they actually target you with their, for instance, if it's Safaricom, target you with lots of maybe offers and stuff like that. And so the people who now do the actual developing of that and processing that information, basically the orchestrators, they're systems people. So for that reason, therefore, we began by talking about the social contract. You have to think about this, and I think we mentioned it before. There will be the takers. So if you're collecting that information, you are Safaricom, you're that supermarket or University in Nairobi, then when you collect information from the people, then use it for the purpose for which, the legitimate purpose for which it was collected, in ways that is beneficial to the givers of that information, and only use it for that. Okay, so there's a way in which you need to have that understanding. You ask for my information, as NTSA, you're only going to use that information for that purpose to give me a license, okay, to enable me maybe transfer my car and stuff like that, only that. Don't use it for anything else. So in other words, so of course, if you need to use
this data that you're collecting for any other purpose, which the giver was not aware, then you actually need to go and explain, this is what I want to do with this data, and then ask me whether I am okay with that. So that is informed consent. So get consent from me that is based on knowledge. So give me the information. I need to know what you want to use this information for and why, and how it's going to be used, how it's going to affect me. Then I can say either yes or no. So the takers and orchestrators need to be able to get consent from the users, okay, so that they explain to them the purpose for which you collect the information. And of course, you make sure that, if you're giving information, provide what is necessary for them to be able to take decisions that will help everybody. For instance, some places you go, they ask you for certificate of good conduct. So you go to the police and then you give them all this information about yourself. Then by giving them the information, they're able to look at all the records they have. In this case, say we've cleared this lady. She has there's nothing pending. There are no accusations. There are not court cases. There are no criminal whatever. So they clear you. So they should, so provide that information so that they can be able to do that. Okay. Then lastly is that the gatekeepers or the orchestrators, the ones who actually use this information, or the ones who do the censorship, or the ones who keep this information, process it for whatever reason, they should be kept in such that it's used with fidelity. Okay, so for instance, it doesn't go to the wrong hands. It's not used for the wrong purposes and stuff like that. Okay. So of course, it means that the contract should be able to handle that. So of course, it raises issues. Who owns the intellectual output and who is entitled to use it? So the whole aspect about if we come up with new software or new music or some research, so we need to just make sure that since you're the one who came up with it, you put in time, you put in your intellectual abilities and time and resources, then you should be able to benefit from it and decide who can use it or may not use it. Okay. So issues that arise, of course, is privacy, okay, of personal information, the accuracy and the quality of information. Of course, if you want quality, accurate information, there's a cost element to it. So again, who meets that cost? Okay, again, who gets access to what kinds of information and at what conditions? For instance, you are saying that if it's government information, you're entitled to it, and it should be easily accessible. Okay, so and at what conditions? Is there some information from government which may not be accessible? For instance, information that has to do with, say, national security, for instance. Then, what about the issue of gatekeeping? Who is the gatekeeper? Who gets to control the flow of that information? So we have to be clear about that. If there is censorship, for instance, if we are saying, I like some information from the Hansard of the, Parliament, who gets to decide this one is not accessible to the whole public? Who gets to redact information? Say, for instance, there's a parliamentary committee, say, on some issue that touches on security. Okay, for instance, there's a saga that is going on around Adani Group. So people are demanding to see the transactions and all the data that and letters passing between the people. And some people have already gone to court to force the government to release this. So the question is, who gets to decide what out of all the information coming out is redacted so that people don't get to see it? Because maybe it touches on security. But again, who gets to do that? Who gets to decide that? So those issues, we should be able to think about them. So we raise those issues so that you see that in this information society, there should be some kind of a social contract. But a social contract sometimes needs to be enabled, put some bit of teeth. Because sometimes when there are norms, people may not necessarily keep them. Then we decide there's some norms that are okay, but there's some deviant activity we shall not entertain. And of course, you go ahead and either come up with policies, clear policies to follow, guidelines, okay, and in some instances, come up with acts of parliament, laws that say, no, no, you don't go beyond this point. Now you're moving into the space of evil behavior. And we decide we do that, we're going to actually sanction you or punish you for that. So for that reason, there are laws that have been put into place to try and help people navigate in this space: privacy laws, freedom of information laws, and copyright laws. There's some acts of parliament I should be able to upload onto the class. You can actually get them if you go, say, to the Ministry of ICT and Digital Economy, but I'll probably just download and just put them in the classroom. One of them is around the Freedom of Information laws, and I think there's Access to Information Acts, which we shall be able to get. And then, of course, there's copyright laws. I won't go much into detail, but it's just to reiterate, privacy is about your right as an individual to decide for yourself what should be communicated to others about you. So think about, say, who should access your CV, who should access your social media space, who should access to the way you spend your money, okay? Who should access to your emails and all your social media posts, okay? Who should access, say, your M-Pesa transactions and many other things. Maybe you develop software. Who should access the source code for that software that you're developing? So, but that is at the personal level. So when it comes to the organizational level, then we don't talk about privacy, we talk about confidentiality. So an organization deciding what about them should be communicated. For instance, if you think about R&D findings, maybe you've developed an organization like Safaricom has developed this software. So for instance, the source code to that, maybe there's some algorithms that organization has that they want to share. Maybe certain strategic, maybe certain strategies, okay, that organization has that they actually protect because that is what is giving them a competitive edge, okay? Maybe it's designs, maybe you're into manufacturing and you have certain designs and you want to protect that because you see that as a very valuable as an organization. So you decide don't get access to that. So there's some information which only certain people in the organization are allowed to get. That's confidentiality. So basically that's stuff which I don't really want to go into. But I want to mention this acts, and I think there's actually one after this. I think there's a later one. Access to Information Act. And I will actually download this and put on the classroom. But the main thing about this is about the freedom of information. And it basically a law that says that when people gather information and process and stuff about you, you should be protected from people using that information with fidelity and using it for the reason for which it's meant to be there. So you should, for instance, if you needed to get information about you held by Safaricom, they should be able to give it to you. If you need to get information that is held by the government's maybe what, NTSA, maybe the Registration Bureau, they should be able to give you that information. Maybe information that is held about you by the university, you should be able to get it. Maybe the information heard about you by the county, or you should be able to get it and see what is stored. And if you have a right to tell them if you don't like the way it is, or the way it's stored, or the form it takes, to actually either amend what is inaccurate or delete it. Okay, and you could actually claim for damages for people maybe who have misused your information. Okay, so there's actually a law that does that, and there's established an office under the ombudsman, where you go to parliament and say, I want this information. Okay, and then the clerk says, okay, give us. So it's actually established. How long will you give people for them to be able to give you that information? And if they don't give you that information, what recourse do you have? So this Access to Information Act deals with all those things, which we shall be able to look at. So of course, it's about personal data about held by people. But then of course, so for instance, this organization are putting up banks, insurance companies, credit rating bureaus. By law, they don't even ask you. They just keep getting all the information from your bank, from your financial services providers. If you take loans, if you take credit, if you take whatever, that information goes to them and they just keep it. Hospitals, doctors, police, government agencies. So, in the university, they keep all this information, okay? So ideally, this is what we're saying. KRA, they have information. So you could, or employers, you could ask people, hey, I want to see the information you're holding about me. So they are obligated by law to provide it so that you can actually see whether it's accurate and how they're keeping it. And you could actually say, no, you got it all wrong. You need to edit it and make it accurate, or you could decide, get rid of it, okay? However, the Act says you can do that, but there are some exceptions. For instance, if you want to be a justice in this country, or a judge, they will go and get information about you from NSIS, from the police, from KRA, from anywhere and everywhere, from Safaricom, and they won't tell you because they're trying to vet you, okay? So the other one is, of course, legal professional privilege. When you talk to your lawyer, ideally that information should not be accessible to anyone else, and I guess even the lawyer shouldn't use it for whatever reasons, okay? And of course, there is credit reference data. That one, the orchestrators get it without asking you. So they are basically exemptions. So basically, so it brings out lots of things. For instance, for now, for the ICT sector, there is the issue of IP protection. If you come up with a processor that is different, or like this, different kinds of processors, you can actually register patents, okay? So for the computing, if you come up, say, with a processor or a very, 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 maybe like the GPU that maybe is working so much faster, then you can actually get a patent. But if you come up with software, you may not get a patent. You don't actually have patents for software. So that one, you actually register copyright. Okay, so that it's registered, and it's registered under your name, for people to actually utilize that software. Then of course they need to actually get permission, or you need to agree on how they're going to pay them. So there are also other trademarks, designs, and stuff like that. Okay. So we talk about a few things. I don't want to just get into lots of detail. I think you can look at the notes and then look at some of the documents you've actually put up around this. Okay. The whole issue about copyright. Okay. Uh, for instance, copyright, just like music or software, intellectual property, a lot is actually copyright as opposed to patent. Um, of course, you know the story of open source. There's something called copyleft. Okay, it's copyright and copyleft. The thoughts around that is around things on say open source. What you do is you're allowed to copy and use and even improve it or use it for something else. You can actually use it and get all that you can get there to actually come up with a product or a service. But you need to acknowledge. So you don't have to get permission, but you need to acknowledge so that you use this particular, say, algorithm, or maybe use this particular framework, or maybe it's a library that is available. You can actually use it and even go use it on your software, a commercial software, but you need to acknowledge where it's coming from. It's almost like you do when you're, say, doing scientific writing. You have to exactly state where you got it and who it is you got it from. That's called copyleft. So it allows you to use some things uh, without necessarily asking for copyright, but you don't operate as if it's your own. Okay. Okay. So that brings about the issue of software piracy, for instance. So if software people get copyright, so of course if you use without people's permission or you don't purchase the licenses, then of course it's piracy. And so of course there will be some laws around piracy. Okay. Then, of course, in terms of the legal issues to ensure that we're basically doing what we're supposed to do, there is contracts, for instance. Think about contracts around SLAs, okay? Contracts around uh, quality of software, for instance. Uh, maybe things like contracts around NDAs, when you start signing contracts and say maybe you've been hired by a startup because you're designing a certain algorithm for them as or a certain part of their application, so they make you sign an NDA, non-disclosure agreement. It's an actual contract. You will not disclose that for so many years, after you're basically remunerated and stuff like that. So these are some of the things that we put in place. Okay. So of course there's the issue of health and safety, because sometimes you're going to develop software or hardware devices that actually affect people in a negative way. Of course, then the other one is, of course, crime, fraud, fraud, computer theft, hacking, those kind of things, which of course are unethical. Okay, unethical because you're getting access to information which we shouldn't be. So I think last year as we finished, I want us to think about the information professionalism. So that's what I want us to think about. But let me ask before we get into this, who is a professional? What is a profession? Who is a professional? When you talk about a professional, what do we mean? Or who is a professional and who is not?
I think I think a professional is someone who does, a job correctly and follows, concise steps. It's not someone who does a job casually, in short.
Okay. So they talk about precise, uh, they do it well, it's not casual. Okay. But we probably need a bit more precision than that. How do we determine what is casual and what is good and well and precise? Where do we make the cut? Or what criteria do we use for that? But thank you, Brazen. Yeah, okay. Omondi?
A professional is a person who has the highest degree of skill in a certain domain, and to measure that degree of skill, what you're talking about, if it's casual or not, is determined by the domain itself.
Is determined by the?
Domain, the domain itself.
Oh, the domain. So the highest level of skill, okay, in a certain domain. So that's a professional. So then maybe I want to ask whether there's different cadres or professionals in a profession, because perhaps, if, for instance, it's medicine. If medicine is is a profession, then you may have some guy who is a brain surgeon and a general practitioner. Perhaps they have different levels of skill. But thank you for sharing that. Okay, someone else? Yes, Ryan.
Okay, so I think a professional is someone who undertakes a specific occupation, whether in any level, as long as you're undertaking a specific occupation and you consistently work on it. I think you're a professional in that specific occupation.
Okay, a specific occupation. I'm in the PhD lab and there's a lot of noise to move. A specific occupation, and they're very, is it consistent about it?
Yes.
So we have this neighbor in the village who has been, they are a farmer, and that's their occupation, right? They farm potatoes and tomatoes and some cucumbers. They have been consistent for the last 30 years. They're very meticulous. So we say they are a professional. I'm just asking from your definition.
I think I'd say yes, if they have had specific training in that activity, which is farming, and they have done it consistently, I'd say that they are a professional in that domain of farming.
So you've introduced the concept of training, okay? So you said a professional, even though they have done something consistently in their livelihood, in the occupation, they have to be trained. So the issue of training is coming in, okay?
Yes.
That's that. Okay. Yeah. Yes. Go on, Ryan.
Oh no, I was saying yes, like yes.
Okay. So let me give you two scenarios. So, some of us have grown up in this countryside. So you grew up as, maybe as you're going to primary school until you went to high school. There's this guy who is, in the village where your folks live, and they've been repairing bicycles. Everybody goes there, they sort out people's bicycles. Doesn't matter whether it's Black Mamba or some mountain bikes. They're very good. My question is, they have done it consistent for many years. Are they a professional? Then I'll also ask another one. Now I'm a bit rusty as far as our footballers are concerned. The ones I used to know, I think maybe have retired. There's be a guy called Wanyama. Okay, there's another guy. What is his name? Mariga, I think. I'm not sure whether they are still footballers, in the Premier League. So, footballers like those ones. So, are they professionals? I gave you two scenarios: a footballer and a very, very good guy who makes who repairs bicycles. I'm just following up with the definition that we are giving.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, Ryan feels yes. Okay, Jerry, Ngogi.
I also think that a professional is somebody who works under a sort of body, a governing body that tells them how to operate or has clear guidelines on how they operate. Yeah.
Okay, Jerry is adding something else, that professionals, there are guidelines they follow, and they are not just random. Those guidelines are established by a body which they work under. They're the ones who actually release those guidelines, so they work under them. It's almost like she's saying they need to be certified by that body, and they they make sure that you're actually following those guidelines. So that's an addition to some of the things that we're hearing. Okay. Of course, you can see we are expanding our definition. Then we are allowed to go back and look at, we talk about a farmer, we talk about a footballer, we talk about a bicycle repairer, whether they actually can be referred to as professionals. Okay. Okay, interesting conversations. I'll keep you for the next 10 minutes with your permission. I'll steal your 4 minutes kindly, and I'll let you go. But let me just share some few slides, then I can let you go. So we're introducing the concept of the information professionalism. Okay, so I think, well, I think we've already mentioned that it's from what we said that exclusive occupational groups. I think we talked about it. They've got special expertise, and they do a certain job. They solve people's problems. They provide certain services. There's a bit of exclusivity because they're experts, they're very consistent, they're very knowledgeable, at the highest level of knowledge in that domain. They do certain work. So of course, some of the ones which are very familiar with: medicine, law, architecture, engineering. So here we are. But if truly we are saying that, the information society, the information explosion, all this knowledge economy and everything else has brought about a different way of looking at things. We're in a different society, then this whole life cycle of information, okay, gathering, storage, processing, dissemination, and utilizing this for providing services, or maybe for economic reasons for working, then there's someone emerging there, professional emerging there, whose basic job is to deal with the information. Okay. So we're roughly calling them an information professional. But let's go back a little bit before we tie it down. Where we started, professional, it's actually taken from the Latin root words of pro and fertile. Pro is before, and fertile is to avow. Okay, and these are just a covenant or a vow to be faithful to something or to someone. You've heard of the hypocritical oath doctors take. When lawyers finish law school here at UON, they go to the professional law school in Karen. They're there for a year. Then part of that, like 6 months, they go on pupillage in industry. At the end of that 1 year, they have to do some exams. Now, if they pass those exams, then they are certified by and after that, then they can be called to the bar. Okay, and then there is actually a body, the Law Society of Kenya, that makes sure that lawyers are supposed to actually follow certain guidelines. Okay, so one more or less like vows to do something, or think about even doctors. Actually, there's actually a body that even engineer. There's engineer. What is it called? ISK, Engineers Society of Kenya, something like that. That basically is meant to be the body that, so. But the thing is that they vow to be able to do something. So, and basically they vow to be able to be true to following the established guidelines, processes and guidelines, and to use the skills, the knowledge and the skills to be able to do something for the client, as it were. And then, of course, the thing is that if you say you're a doctor and say you're a cardiologist, you're expected to have similar knowledge and skills. And everybody coming to you should be able to get similar services, as it were, because again, there's a code of conduct. You have mastered the body of knowledge. You have worked under a professional. You have been tested and certified. Okay, then now you've been certified to actually provide the services. So there's that expectation. So in terms of definition, so professionals possess a certain store of knowledge more than everybody else. Today, if you're not feeling too well, you can go to online to Google or maybe to charts and then check out some stuff about how you feel. But your colleagues from the Faculty of Health Sciences have been here for 6 years, okay, and they basically work around understanding the human body and microbes and how microbes have the human body and basically how to identify the microbes, look at the symptoms, identify what's happening, do tests and establish what's happening, and then be able to know how to treat it. So they spend 6 years. Then after the 6 years, they actually taken to industrial attachment, internship, and they are there under a senior certified doctor, and they work under them for another year, then they are released. What want you if you do your medicine in the US, because you will do your past degree maybe in biology or biochemistry or something, then you do your 4 years medical school, and then after that you go for 3 years internship. And the main thing with doing this is that you must master the body of knowledge, then you must master how to utilize it to treat people. So that store of knowledge is not ordinary. So they possess theoretical and intellectual grasp that is different from a technician's practice. I was asking about the guy who repairs bicycles, okay, or the guy who is, when you want your car worked on thoroughly, you take it to this guy, or this lady, and she will sort you out, Say, I don't take my car to anyone else. The question is, are they a professional engineer or are they a technologist or a technician? Okay, so basically they utilize our knowledge to solve problems, social problems, provide services. But something that we need to know is that a profession strives to add and to improve its body of knowledge, meaning that a profession, true profession, should actually be engaging in research to see how, what knowledge is being discovered and how can we utilize that knowledge to make things better. For instance, they say if you find that your doctor does not read, look at the latest medical journals, read them, the top medical journals and the latest medical conferences. Don't go near them because they are made to be treating with what they learned 5 years ago, and that's been overtaken in this area of ailment. Okay, so the medical profession is expected to actually continue doing research and utilizing the new knowledge to help them know how to do things better. So that's another aspect of a profession. So they're expected to actually carry out research so that they can get new knowledge on how to do things better. And then lastly, profession passes on the body of knowledge to the novice generations. In most cases, probably not all, but in most cases in the university setting. So I think you've had this controversy, it's still going on, where some people would go to a certain university and do a certain degree program in engineering, and then the registration body of engineers of Kenya would refuse to certify them, so they can't operate as engineers. And normally there's a lot of noise, and some people have even gone to court, and then they say, oh, the court says according to the law, only Commission of University of Education is allowed to actually determine the curriculum to certify and to make sure that you're trained like that. But then the medic say, okay, good. But if you have a university and the lecturers are not doctors and you graduate, we are not touching you. You are not going to be certified as a doctor because you must be trained by a professional because they possess the knowledge and how to utilize the knowledge. So you can't just be trained by somebody who has read and say, I have read a lot of medicine, so I can train you. No. It has to be a professional. This is the last bullet. So professional, basically, you have to train. That's how come, for instance, people come here to do law, but they have to go and are a lawyer for 1 year. People do medicine and they go out there and are senior doctor for 1 year. Senior for engineers and architects. You can't practice as a registered architect unless you finished, the 6 years here, and then you've gone out and worked and done an architect, a registered architect for 3 years. Then, of course, you do exams, and then, of course, you're certified. So I think because of time, I won't go into this, but I introduced this and I'll let you guys finish. So an information professional is basically someone whose work operates around information, gathering, processing, storage, dissemination of the information, and utilizing that information to provide the service or to meet a need. Okay? Because these guys or these people basically deal with the information. So they have specialized knowledge on how to use this information to meet needs. Okay? So I'll surprise you who they look like. IPs, information professional who build, safeguard, and operate managerial strategic system for organizations. Okay, for instance, management information systems specialist. Think about software engineers. Basically, just write code and implement code and test code so that they can. So those are software engineers. Okay. What about people whose job is to tell stories, make observations, do all kinds of research, whatever. The media, they basically deal with information. They don't do nothing else. What about certified financial accountants? You know, what about archivists and historians? They deal with information only. What about, you know, people who curate museums, okay? What about database administrators? You know, what about operational researchers? So basically, these people, they deal with information, and maybe I'll stop here. They develop and maintain a body of knowledge. For instance, think about, say, software engineers, okay? They educate and train professionals. You want to make sure that the people training you have actually developed software, for instance, and they're actually working in their space. They monitor and self-regulate practice and practitioners. So that's a tough one. We talked about the Medical Practitioners Board. They have an interesting long name. You know, the LSK for lawyers, the Certified Public Accountants Body, the CPAC for accountants. I'm not quite sure we have some for, say, software engineers. In places like the UK, the Computer Society of the UK, they actually, universities take their curriculum there to be satisfied by them. Okay, not here perhaps. So I think we'll stop there. I'll just allow you to finish the rest and maybe, yeah, because of time, but I'll allow you to just look at what we haven't finished. But let me hear any questions you have before I let you go, or any whatever else. So that was basically, we moved. Okay, Hassan, you have a question?
Yes, sir, I have a question. Do you think it's ethical to commercialize, whether it's media houses that put information paywall, or other companies that ask you to purchase research papers or academic articles so that you can read them?
I'm struggling to hear you, Hassan. Let me try and see. Just noise. There's a bit of background noise. Just get closer to your microphone and just let me hear again. I'm struggling to hear you.
Is it okay now?
Go on, Hassan.
Can you hear me now? I'm speaking.
Yes.
Is it okay now?
Yeah, go on here. Go on, speak now, Hassan.
My question was, is it a good thing, or it is? I mean, is it ethical to commercialize information? For example, we see most of the times media houses putting their articles behind a paywall so that you can read them. First, you have to maybe subscribe, or yani it's a premium thing. Or for example, there are companies that force you to purchase. For example, if you want to read a research paper or an academic article, they ask you to purchase these articles. So is that a good thing?
And I'm laughing. My microphone was off, but I think you're raising a very fundamental issue. Is it a good thing? You know, a lot of content today is online, right? So you have this, but very authoritative industry publication, and then you're there, and then you can see the title and you read the first paragraph. Then they tell you, oh, you need to pay $1 a week or yeah, the research article. And then you can see the abstract, but for you to get access to the paper, they are like, you need to pay. Plus, of course, you talked about the media. You don't subscribe, say, to one of the magazines you love, or The Economist. They say, okay, you can't read our article. You can only, or they say this particular one is premium, okay? So you raised a very fundamental issue, research, and you probably also raised I want us to have a very good discussion about this because this is important. So I want to ask one or two questions. Then I want to ask you, Hassan, please, when we meet next, I want us to have like 5-10 minutes to discuss this because now I know people want to go. Please, please, Hassan, just note, you remind us. But think about it, when people want to use software, sometimes you can't use it without a license, right? Certain software is free. I mean, there is open source software. Some of it is very powerful. But there certain software that you need to get a license to use. If you don't have a license, you can't use it. And that may even be limited. There's some modules or features you won't be able to access except you upgrade your license to something else, okay? So should we still look at it like that? You know what I mean? Or do we say, no, software is a different story, you know what I mean? After all, information is available to everybody, okay? I mean, if it's media, information, you just gather and give this information, you know what I mean? Or if it's research, come on, you're a researcher, you've done all this research. So now you publish the research in a certain journal. Ideally, the reason you're publishing it, so society can get access to get the new knowledge. And maybe even that knowledge, after all, maybe you got funded, by the university or by someone in the government to be able to get it. Why, therefore, do you tell me to subscribe to the journal for me to be able to read that article? So I think it raises very fundamental issues. And I'm glad Hyson raised it up. But I want us to do justice to this. So kindly remind us, Hassan, then we can discuss it in the next class. I think it's very interesting before we move on. Is that okay?
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So I think we'll leave it there. I'll let you go, but let's start off the next time on that note. Then we can move to something else. So as you go, of course, I haven't finished going through your plans. Just allow me to do that. God willing, before the weekend, I shall be able to share it with you so that then it's just my thoughts and my comments. It's perhaps other issues you've left out, other things you need to think about so that you can actually begin to move and work on it, okay? So that as you continue looking at different issues, remember that we're basically giving you probably something that you need as you work towards that particular thing. So thank you very much. Then we'll meet next week.